This Wellness Couch podcast is proudly brought to you by Audible. Do you find that you just don't have time to read all of the awesome books that you hear mentioned on the Wellness Couch? Well, Audible might just have the answer. Audible is offering the Wellness Couch listeners a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. You can get books like Eat Right for Your Blood Type, Why We Get Fat by Gary Torbs, The Paleo Diet for Athletes, or even The Success Principles by Jack Canfield. So to download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/The Wellness Couch. Again, that's audibletrial.com/The Wellness Couch for your free audiobook.
TheWellnessCouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, featuring your hosts Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today you are all joining us on a very special beginning and ending of a journey, which you have all been part of, and it has just been immense for Bridget. Yeah. So I would like you, Bridget, to make your announcement.
Sure. So I'm pregnant.
Woo! Bridget, the woman who was infertile and had PCOS and
all these
couldn't
challenges.
conceive, is pregnant with no medical intervention.
Yeah, and I think if you've listened for us long enough and you went back and heard that podcast on infertility where I really challenged that whole paradigm, because I've really felt that fertility was something so much more fluid than simply just placing a label on it as being, a finite, not working. It's been quite momentous to really trust that journey and I guess do the work that I've been doing to get to the place where I've been able to create this baby.
What does that even mean? Because that's a really big sentence to really own. Yeah. Get to the place where I have been able to create this baby. That's also huge to own that in the past you were not in a place of being able to create space or call in more life. Do you want to elaborate there a little?
Yeah, and it's funny because it's not necessarily that I have created physical room in my life. Like, it's not like that my life's been any less busy, in inverted commas, or that by all the common parameters you might say you've created space. It's really been around shifting beliefs and creating the space mentally and emotionally and spiritually for that.
And I would even say even less than mental, more emotional and spiritual space.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you need the mental to do that journey.
That's right.
But for you, really, it has been such massive belief system shifts in the way that you viewed the world, the way that you viewed yourself, the way that you viewed mainstream medicine and natural medicine has really completely shifted.
And I think this podcast has been absolutely a journey of that, of that that growth and that change and that acceptance and surrender, which is really what anyone on the fertility journey would certainly identify with, is how out of control you might feel, in that, and this podcast has been integral, this relationship that we've got, Julie and I, but also with you, our listeners, in terms of getting vulnerable and getting honest and unpacking what it means to be a woman and a mother.
Oh, Bridget, that's so powerful. Getting vulnerable and honest with what it means to be a woman and a mother.
It's big stuff, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, I love that.
And, it's kind of beautiful because, in fact, I don't think I've mentioned this on a podcast, but when we were at the Wellness Summit and we spoke at the Wellness Summit last August, I hadn't had a period for 2.5 years. And I got my period back the day that we were to get up on stage and talk about the feminine.
Which we were just loving the shit out of, really.
Yeah, which was just so powerful because to me, it spoke to me on how important this work is. And how important it is to value.
If you were ever after a sign from the gods, that was it, wasn't it? Yeah.
And in fact...
Awaken here.
Yeah. And in the Wellness Summit this year, I'm due to be carrying a little baby, in a sling, it's sort of where we're heading, which is really, really powerful.
So let's just step it back a little because I really want you to elaborate a bit more on what your personal journey has been on being part of and at the same time rebucking both mainstream and natural versions of fertility medicine.
Yeah, and I guess part of me feels vulnerable and not entirely comfortable with, like, where do I go with that? Because for me, like, there could be no other way. Like, I suppose I followed intuitively how I felt that it was going to unfold for me, or I just trusted that I didn't need those things. You know, there was a point at which I turned away even from naturopathy. You know, like,
that's what I really want to talk about, is the honesty of you have embraced that whichever system you want to talk about, and then at some point realised it's beyond that.
Yeah.
So would you like to break that apart a little?
Yeah.
Maybe start with, how long has your journey been? So how long have you been in, I'm going to say inverted commas, limbo, craving the space for a baby to come in, and you working through the stuff you needed to for that life to appear?
Yeah. Well, I suppose, before I had my son, I think I always thought, you know, when he's 1, I'll try and start for number 2, like, knowing it could take a while. And, you know, obviously knowing that I didn't get my period back till when he was 2.5, you know, that's quite a long time. And I think it must have been probably, I'm trying to think back to when it would have been that I seriously started to address this. And it would be 18 months ago. It would have been when he was probably about 18 months old. And I thought, okay, it's not just breastfeeding here. It's not just breastfeeding that's not allowing my period to come back. There's something else underlying. And so it never really entered my mind that I wanted to pursue mainstream medicine to address it. I had always used natural medicine in the past, the acupuncture.
But you'd considered at one point, because I remember having a conversation with you.
Oh, that's right, because a naturopath had told me that I should go and have a laparoscopy or something.
Yeah, and you had said, look, I'm even at the point... No, it was even after that, and you said, I'm even at the point now where I realise even my resistance to going down mainstream medicine is just a belief and a perception.
That's right, it's true.
And I will, at some point, look at the fact that I need to actually embrace both, and potentially even choose that and deal with the belief systems that are holding me back from making that choice.
Absolutely.
Like, you had even got to that point where you're like, I see the blessings in that path, and I would choose to take that, and the only thing that would stop me from doing that is my belief systems, and therefore shifting of my perceptions. That's
right. Actually, that's right. I do recall that conversation, because there was a suggestion from a naturopath that might be wise, you know, just to go and see if there's something
more sinister underlying.
Yeah, or something more at a physical level that needs addressing. And I guess I accepted that and saw that could definitely be an avenue, but also really felt that if I wasn't dealing with the underlying emotion or psychology that was manifesting in this inverted commas infertility, then those physical symptoms would only come back again. You know, so I guess I saw that could have been an option for me, and that I would have pursued it had this persisted. But that I also really felt that on the same lines, I also needed to understand the beliefs that were entrenched for me, and the way of life or way of viewing the world that was entrenched for me, that was keeping me from creating that space and freeing myself from, I guess, in a lot of ways, living in more of a masculine energy, you know, in having the beliefs that kept me from connecting with, you know, that feminine self and the perhaps...
That could be incredibly painful. I'm just thinking about, some women could be hearing this and thinking, I really want to be pregnant and I'm not. And from your story, it's a big step to take that ownership. It totally is, yeah. It's my stuff holding me back, as opposed to...
Because it's not always, right? Like, so in some cases with fertility issues, it's not always the women stuff, you know, it's something going on with the man, or it's sometimes it can't be as simple as, I just sit with my stuff and figure it out, because that's a little bit of lip service and a little bit insulting, you know, really, depending on the situation that you're facing. I guess for me, I spent a lot of time understanding what PCOS in particular meant.
And what it meant to you.
What it meant in my own life, you know, so because for me it was not just simply, you know, PCOS is not owning yourself as a woman and not standing in your feminine. It was all of the, you know, probably judgments of my sexual history and my sexual experiences, and, you know, retreating from expressing myself that way, that also compounded those challenges for me. So I guess it was understanding the psychology of it, excuse me, at the same time as relating that back to my own story, you know, and it's funny that my voice is choking up. Yeah, so I think it's so unique to all of us. And, had I pursued, the conventional Western approach, then I probably would have just been a different way to get probably to the same point, right? But I guess so much of my own journey has been wanting to awaken itself and really to use my experiences as an opportunity or a vehicle to do that. To really...
The challenges you were going through were challenges that have been put in front of you for you to have the opportunity to grow as a soul and as a woman and as a mother, human incarnate here right now. The challenge that was here for you right now was your infertility. And so your journey was, I'm not infertile. I've just got to get my way through this challenge and embrace the benefits and the blessings that are coming with it, which for you were actually many, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely.
So when you look at this, has been probably one of your life's greatest challenges, would you say?
Yeah, I would say so, yeah.
And would you say equally on par to the greatness of the challenge would be the greatness of the support and the benefit you've gotten out of going through this challenge?
I'm so enormously grateful for it. And I remember you and I talking about this, I think in the podcast that we had on miscarriage. And I think I said, it was funny because in the early weeks, I actually went back and listened to our Fear in Pregnancy podcast. And I was like, screw you, you can say all this when you're not in it. It's all fine to say when you're not in it, because I was having a particularly anxious moment. I thought, it's easy to sound so wise when you're not going through something, right? When you've got distance from an experience.
Totally. When you're not in the emotion.
When you're not in the emotion, because when you're in the emotion, you're so caught up in it that you can't see, the wood for the trees. You're so caught up. Yeah, so what I know that we addressed in that miscarriage podcast was how the lessons that gave us, or in my case, particularly the intention that I had in that pregnancy that I don't know that I would have had otherwise. The intention
in Hugo's pregnancy.
Pregnancy and that birth, which was after the miscarriage. Yes. I got so informed, and I don't know that I would have had the outcomes in his pregnancy and his birth that I would have had otherwise had I not had that experience of loss that made me so much more potentially grateful for the experience I was having.
So when you're looking back on how immense this challenge has been for you, what are the benefits that you have received out of taking a passage through that challenge?
I think I've got to know myself so much more deeply. I wouldn't have been compelled to go on the personal growth and learning journey that I have gone on had I not had a challenge like this to overcome. I think I've mentioned quite a bit that I've studied a little bit of human behaviour work and universal principles with John Demartini, and there was a course that I did with him in June last year. And in that, I spent probably 8 hours kind of doing a collapse on myself to basically balance my perception that I wasn't infertile. So I had to look, and I had to have a lot of people helping me to see all the parts of myself where I was fertile. Because even though I might say, I think fertility is fluid and all those things, I can believe that at an intellectual level, but I clearly wasn't believing it. At an emotional
cellular level.
I wasn't vibrating at that. I wasn't. And so it wasn't until I was able to see that in fact exactly where I was perfect for me right then, and that I wouldn't change where I was, and that I could see that yes, my fertility wasn't in the conventional place, in inverted commas, it wasn't expressing itself in terms of cycles or a pregnancy. I was fertile in so many other areas of my life, in my relationships, in the business ideas that I was having, the business that I was growing, the child that I was nurturing. There was just so much there, but that I hadn't seen it because I was trying to look for it in the form that I was trying to look for it, not in the form that it was already manifesting for me. And once I was able to, and also I was also able to recognize all the things that wouldn't have happened had I have been pregnant or had I have been, fertile, then what had transpired for me to get me to that moment wouldn't have transpired. It couldn't have happened. And I could therefore see it couldn't be any other way.
Because your life would not be what it is or was back then at that point, had you not.
And I wonder, if I had not had this experience, would I still stay, somewhat unawake to learning more than what I see in front of me, and what I perceive.
Because it's been a massive driver for you to really go on this journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Because I was so determined that I didn't want to.
You're so determined really just to look at your own shit and
Yeah.
why that was manifesting for you as opposed to it's happening for me. You were looking at why is this manifesting?
Yeah.
What is its message? And what is the path I'm being sent on here in order to clear it? Is really a different way that you were looking at it.
Yeah. I guess I really wanted to I was in a situation and I wanted to use the situation to grow from it as opposed to shrink and subordinate to what someone else might have told me that I had to do. You know, I mean that's the point that I got to where I felt like, you know, and that's the thing, you know, whether it's you're taking a Western approach or whether you're taking a natural medicine approach, it's coming back and entrusting what your own intuition and what you feel is right for you, and it's listening to your own inner voice that any challenge, I guess, is trying to teach us. You know, because I stopped seeing a naturopath because I just felt like it wasn't the right avenue for me, and even just being able to say no, I don't want to do this anymore. Like that's empowering. It's just as empowering to say no to something that as it is to say yes to something. I think sometimes. And trusting a different approach or trusting...
But it wasn't, no, I don't want to do this anymore because it's too hard or I can't be bothered, because you had done the hard yards. You were gluten-free, you'd gone paleo, you were organic. Like you had done all of the hard stuff, and it wasn't that you weren't willing to sustain that.
No.
It was that you and I had really started opening up conversations around health beyond what is literally physically happening in our bodies and what is physically going into our bodies in the form of food is what is health beyond that. And so then really out of a lot of those conversations and your awakenings was, why am I so focused on this one aspect of health when I really honestly believe that the beliefs that I'm holding about myself or the situation or whatever are actually what's keeping me here.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was once I could let go of, because then that was just another, you know, another thing that I got caught up in, you know, the whole food rules, right? And I can't eat that, and that's bad, and I shouldn't have that. And that's all that shooting on yourself. That's all that injected values from some other authority that you're now saying is the right person to tell you what you can and can't eat or whatever. And it just didn't feel right anymore. And there was so much freedom in relaxing that, you know. But
in relaxing that, looking at the belief systems you were holding and working through those individual belief systems around why you needed to or should be eating or choosing that, right?
Yeah. But it was a big shift though. Like it was a big thing to let go of that, because that to me seemed like the path to wellness, right? Like the path to wholeness and the path to fertility was to treat my body like a temple in terms of what I put in it. But that didn't address at all how I thought about myself, how I thought about the world, how I perceived others, how I perceived my own story. That none of that came into that.
Or the beliefs you held that made you or led you to making those choices.
Yeah. And so once I could step back from that and see that as one of just many of, or one part of a spectrum of what it means to have health or to have wellness, and started to place my attention on the other areas, like, you know, my mindset, like my belief systems, like, you know, how I was perceiving myself and others, how I was perceiving my fertility. That's when I think things started to click more for me. You know, when I started to question my thoughts, when I started to question my behaviours, or almost be a bit more self-reflective, right? Like, so be a bit more aware of
your motivators.
Yeah. And, you know, I think that really allowed me to connect in more with my body. You know, how was my physiology feeling in response to certain things that might be happening around me, or certain thoughts I might be having in my head.
What had happened the moment before you had those thoughts, or that implosion of emotion or judgment? What was the thing that happened right at that moment that led you on that thought process? Because that gives you an insight into what's going on for you.
And you know, to perhaps a patterning of beliefs that keep coming up based on certain triggers around me.
Yes, and so then you work at balancing your perceptions and breaking apart those belief systems into seeing where they've come from, how they've served you, and why you no longer need to hold on to them. Yeah, and just
recognizing, I think so much of it, recognizing that everyone is perceiving the world based on their own, values, and that, and whenever I felt a need to project mine onto them, what was that saying about me? Like, what is it that I'm polarized about here that makes me, feel it in my body, that I kind of almost feel a rise in my body in anger or determination to get my point across. Starting to reflect, oh, that's interesting. Why do I feel so strongly about that? What's that telling me about the way that I'm skewing my thinking? And we all do it in every second of the day. We're always doing it. But for me, it's just been bringing more awareness to those experiences, to those trains of thought and patterns. And even, when you start to feel yourself getting flash or down or, spiraling into that, well of kind of woe is me.
I was wondering that. How did you handle, because that, from clients, that has been my biggest experience of the all-consuming thoughts and emotional roller coaster of wanting to be pregnant and then, I don't know, getting your period, or you're not pregnant for another month and another month and another month. Yeah,
that was something that I really felt really, really raw and extremely emotionally before I had Hugo, waiting to be pregnant with him. But it hasn't been something that I've really strongly felt this time.
Even though it's been a much longer waiting period.
Yeah, I think it's because I haven't made that my sole focus. And this can sound, you hear people say this all the time, take a holiday or focus on something else and it will happen. But it's almost like in focusing on the very thing that you want most, it's like the more it almost eludes you until you see that you can have gratitude for where you are.
I was going to say, the point is for you, that I really witnessed externally for you, was that there was almost a point of gratitude for your infertility. That you really, when I spoke to you, were at a point of, I want this baby in my future and for me and for my family. That doesn't stop me right now from being in grace, in gratitude for where that not having that baby has got me.
Yeah. And
what that awareness of not being able to grasp that I want has created even more gratitude for that I have.
That's exactly, you've kind of summed it up beautifully. And there's a really great book that I read, which was, what's it called again? The Way of the Fertile Life. And it's that idea that as women we have this incredible reservoir of creativity, that sometimes that reservoir of creativity will manifest in fertility in terms of creating a family, but sometimes it will manifest elsewhere. It will manifest in, a business idea or creating a life for yourself that's different from the track you've always been on. It's almost like paving the way for connection within. And that for some of us it'll be right then and there, it's the baby, but sometimes it's something else that then gets you to the baby. It's almost it's like life is trying to teach you to surrender and connect in with your heart and see the perfection of exactly where you are right now.
And I think sometimes there's so many shifts in women that you can't, I'm always saying this to clients, you cannot be the same woman that you are now in order to have this new soul, this new life, this new baby. This new soul calls in a different story, a different need, and needs a different woman and mother.
And that's absolutely what this journey has taken me on.
You have to have challenge to change, because we don't just change when everything's sweet as.
No.
We only change and morph who we are, what our belief systems are and how we function when we have challenge and we strive and struggle to get over it or through it or whatever it is.
And something I've often, for as long as I can remember, I've always sort of imagined myself as a mother of a daughter and what I would teach her. And I don't think that I would be able to teach her what I want to teach her have I not gone through the necessary challenges that I've had to go through in order to awaken me to the feminine. I feel an enormous responsibility, if I'm a mother of a daughter, to really ease that transition through puberty, and to really nurture that as
awaken her goddess.
Yeah, to give her that sense of ritual that is almost lost now. That's that almost reverence for her womanhood as opposed to resentment for her womanhood and her period and all of those things. And had I not had the challenges that have made me have to put connecting with my own feminine high on my values, I may never have created the space to bring that into fruition.
And that is just the perfection, isn't it? That this soul potentially has been waiting, knowing that that's the experience it needs to have, waiting for you to get to the point of being the woman it needs, she needs, to be brought into this world.
I had a beautiful conversation with my mum recently because we were looking at some school photos of me, and I have this whole story around, like, I just got ugly for like 10 years. Julie just really spat her water everywhere. And I sense, and I know this is a polarized view, probably should go back and look at it, but I can still tap back into those what felt like years of self-loathing. Like, I had the most awful skin, like angry acne, like just felt so ugly and so undesirable. And my mum said to me now, and I remember her saying to me then, yes, but that's what it's like that's being a teenager, but my mum almost had a daughter like me to play it out and help her heal.
Was that her story too?
Yeah. Not like the skin stuff, but certainly feeling like,
so
not womanly.
You were almost the external experience of her internal experience.
So I was almost playing that out for her again to help her heal her own stuff, but also there was pain in that. There would have been pain in that for her because it would have been bringing it all up for her, her seeing hugely painful watching your daughter loathe who she is.
Yeah.
And so I almost feel like in some ways so much of what I've journeyed through the fertility challenges, through this podcast, through our retreats, through my own personal growth sort of path and learning has been to equip myself to not play that out again, to almost create the healing, to create a different story. And the toolkit. And to value, like, to not simply accept that that's just what it means to be a teenager, to kind of, how do I help my daughter through a different path? I don't know. And that may, at the same time, we can also say, well, if I hadn't had all those experiences, would I be here today? Probably not. Would I have married the husband I have? Probably not. Like, we can't judge it as bad because those challenges that
there was perfection in there. It's painful, but you can see the perfection in where it's led you.
Yeah. It makes us value the things we value because we perceive those things are missing for us.
And creates indeed the woman that you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it creates this.
It's the squealing.
Some kids having fun in the background. So it's given me an immense, I guess, gratitude for life, I think, and for myself in terms of becoming more okay with surrendering.
Surrender is massive. I've told every single birth client I've ever had, write it on a huge card, surrender. And you don't ever get what it means, because I feel like it's almost the elusive thing. You surrender to something, then you realise there's a deeper level of surrender, then you realise there's one after that, and it kind of never ends. And surrender is almost the world's greatest challenge, right?
Yeah.
Is that any challenge that involves you letting go, not having control, having faith, surrendering what you hold true at this point. Surrender is a loaded word, and yet so healing when done.
And it's not about like letting go completely, it's about sort of almost doing the work that you want to do, or doing the creation or the manifesting, but then surrendering to the outcome of how that's going to come about.
Putting in the effort, surrendering which way that's going to go, as opposed to owning control over it.
As opposed to trying to wrangle it to be some certain way.
So you are 12 weeks pregnant? 13?
Yes, 12 weeks.
12 weeks.
When this says it'll be, 13. Yeah.
13 weeks pregnant. And you chose to have a scan.
I chose to have a scan, yes. And I could see the little baby moving. And yeah, it was really powerful.
Was there a lot of fear for you?
There was a little bit of fear because when I had a miscarriage before I had Hugo, that was the scan when I found out the baby hadn't grown. And I could still tap right back into the emotion that I felt then. But I didn't have the sense of foreboding that I had with that pregnancy. I really felt like everything was okay.
So how did you deal with your anxiety?
I think sometimes when you confront your worst fear, it removes the power of that fear can have over you. And so because I'd already confronted that fear once before and felt the pain of that fear coming true, like in losing the baby that I had before Hugo, I guess I was able to wrangle that anxiety knowing that I'd coped with it before and I would again. And I also think that I really trust, as scary as it might be to trust in this, that we never get a challenge that we're not ready for. The universe doesn't give you a challenge you can't handle.
And then in a way you'd balanced your fear in this early pregnancy of this pregnancy because you also saw that even if it was painful and you had a similar experience to your first pregnancy that resulted in the miscarriage, that there would be equal to the challenge gifts and healing that would come out of that. So even though you deeply, deeply wanted this baby, there was a sense of universal, trust and surrender to the perfection of whatever this outcome was going to be, and that your job was to be present and just deal with your belief systems as they came up.
And also I think an awareness of, what we know in terms of universal principles, that everything has two sides. So the bigger the fear, the bigger the fantasy of the opposite occurring. So, I know that now that, like, with my birth with Hugo, my massive fear that I felt when I was trying to labour with him, of him being stillborn, was almost playing out to balance the other side, which was somehow infatuated with the idea of not having him because I wasn't ready to be a mother. Because we can't have, when we feel something so strongly, it's just the other side that's masked. And until we can bring the other side out, we can't really equilibrate how we're thinking. And so, there was a huge part of me I now see that was afraid of being a mother. And so if you lose that baby, well, you don't have to become a mother, do you? It's irrational, but the mind isn't always rational, right? And so that was how that fear had played out for me then. So, we talk about fear as being false evidence appearing real, but fear is also a function of giving us feedback to see where we've got like an out of balance perception of something. And so, I now know, when the fears are coming up, okay, well, do I have some fantasy of something opposite playing out here? And why? What do I see that fulfilling for me? What's that trying to reveal about a deeper fear that I'm not addressing, that I'm potentially using this surface fear to manifest?
Which fear, am I right in saying this pregnancy was, how am I going to continue to have a business and do everything I want to do in my business if I'm also a mother of another young baby? Yeah,
and that was a big part of it. And I think, as perfect as it is, the people we surround ourselves with are often the ones that show us that there are ways to be that are outside the way we're currently perceiving. So I've got a couple of friends who are either mothers who are business owners or heavily pregnant and still like doing their business and have set it up so that they can have a break but still kind of keep their toe in the water. And by being exposed to that, it's almost showed me that it is possible, and I'm only limited by my own perception and belief around what's possible. And that, in some ways, has been healing for me. There's no mistakes in the people we surround ourselves with either, and what they reveal to us to learn more about ourselves. And I mean, that's a classic case for you. It's for your relationship with me and what you've brought to my life. And I can say the same thing about, so many friends, and I'm sure all of our listeners can identify friends who've helped them awaken values within themselves or parts of themselves they didn't quite know whether it was there, or interests that they didn't know were there but have been inspired to pursue because of the influence of others, you know. And so, you know, and there's an element of surrender in that too, you know, that I can do all the things that I can do to set it up, and, you know, but then surrendering to that as well.
And so those two things really was what helped you get through fear in your early pregnancy, I think
Yeah.
it is, again.
Yeah.
And moving forward, so now, totally public knowledge, and you can celebrate being pregnant. And how does that manifest going forward? So how does that change Bridget now? And how does that change, I don't know, your perceptions moving forward? What is now consuming your mind? Do you start thinking about your birth already?
Yeah.
What do you do from here?
Well, I've started setting up a little spot already for the baby in what's going to be the baby's room, and I'm already talking a lot to Hugo about his baby brother or sister, because we're planning to have a home birth, which, I mean, is another big thing too, right?
It's been a massive journey for you to get
It has, and I actually think that, you know, I almost wasn't ready to be pregnant until I was ready to be okay with having a home birth, or to have fully owned that desire within myself, because there was always an element of fear around that up until recently. But it was a decision that I had made probably just after I had Hugo, really, that's what I wanted to do, but that I had to journey that to become entirely comfortable with it. And however it plays out, of course, as well. You know, you can plan all you like, but sometimes, you know, there's two of you in a birth. It's not just you, it's also the baby. So, you know, meeting with the midwife, talking through that process, getting my husband comfortable and on board, getting my mother less fearful about it, although I'm owning my decisions, so that's neither here nor there, but it would be nice if she's comfortable with it. And really getting Hugo around the concept and having some intention around the family that I'm growing and the awareness that I give him of what's unfolding, and how I can make the transition for him as smooth as possible, which I'm thinking about already, because I think it's really important.
The other thing is that involving him in this birth experience, you are actually setting him up with lifelong skill sets around the feminine, the women in his life, and potentially even influencing the birth and the choices moving forward of his family.
It's really beautiful.
By exposing him to another version of possibility.
And it's been a conversation that I've had with a lot of people and I know too, like, the less outer resistance that you get to your decisions, generally that reflects the greater congruence you have with your decisions. So the fact that I'm getting minimal, if any, that I know of, resistance from anybody, whether it be medical people, whether it be friends, confirms for me that it's a choice that is congruent with what I believe. You know, it's not like I'm trying to, when I tell people that I'm trying to convince them, because I don't really care. Like, it's the choice I'm making for myself.
You don't need to defend it.
I need to defend it. And so therefore, because I don't need to defend it, I'm not getting the resistance in order to defend it. You know what I mean? So that's been interesting to reflect on as it's unfolding. But yeah, like, it's just...
And have you really celebrated and owned your fertility journey? Because you have now manifested fertility in the way that you wanted it manifested, in the area that you wanted it manifested, but you have moved that energy within yourself and within your life to where you wanted it to go by dealing with your challenges and your belief systems and going on a journey of self-discovery.
Somebody said to me recently that I'm a master at that, but I think when you're in it and you don't know any other way than to be the way that you've been, I don't think I am fully owning that.
I don't think you are, right?
No.
Even doing this podcast, I said to you, oh my gosh, you should be shouting this from the rooftops.
Yeah.
This is amazing. What an incredible journey this is to really look at infertility from a spiritual almost perspective, right?
Yes.
You've really ultimately not used any physical medicine in the terms of mainstream or natural medicine. You've gone beyond what that is to create fertility within yourself.
Yes. It's pretty powerful, isn't it?
It's massively powerful.
Yeah.
So what is your resistance to really owning that?
I want to say I don't know, but of course I know, because we always have the answers. Maybe it's the fear of jinxing it, or thinking that I've got all the answers if I scream it from the rooftops, because I really don't. Like, they're the answers for me, and there's a formula that I could put together for others in terms of asking themselves quality questions. But I don't also want to paint it as a panacea for anyone who's got their own story, because our stories are also unique to us. And I think that it's important to have reverence for each woman's journey, however that looks, and to not project any particular way that it should be for them. Because I think that society does enough of that. You know, there's enough pressure on women to either not be married or hurry up and get married, or, you know, you better have some children. Oh no, you're not going to have that many children, are you? You know, like, there's a very, very narrow window of acceptability when it comes to being a woman in the mainstream view, I suppose. And so I guess I tread somewhat lightly when I share my story, because I know it's not going to be everyone's way. It's kind of like when you talk about birth choices, like, this is my choice and I'm really comfortable with my choice, but it's not going to be everyone's choice.
No, but it's still an amazing story to talk about, because we don't hear many of those stories.
I feel a responsibility to talk about it in that sense that it shows women that there is another way. You know, there doesn't have to be...
There's more than just the physical.
Yeah, there's
more than just your blood tests and that tiny sliver of, well, this is what's happening in your life right now based on the belief systems you hold, based on what your physiology is right in that moment.
Or this is the only avenue for you because you've not had any success for X number of months or years, and so then your only options are this.
Or if you eat gluten, then you're poisoning your system and lowering your da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's more.
There's more. And there's always more.
And the more is healing, and it's created more wholeness within yourself, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, like, I think we have access to such beauty in every moment, but it's so much based on how we're perceiving things and how we can find gratitude for the life we have, you know. And I think sometimes you can read quotes that allude to that, but they can sometimes feel empty. You don't know how to access that. And I think part of this journey, which we really touch on in these podcasts and work through with our retreat, is, you know,
how do you coach the quality questions on an individual journey?
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, how do we ask those questions of ourselves to, I guess, drink the nectar of this moment?
To peel back our layers.
Yeah.
To uncover what's underlying.
How can we have greater reverence for ourselves? Because that's what it really is. It's about, you know, how can you be more grateful for who you are and what you've achieved and who you've become and who you are to become. And so much of that is about peeling back the layers of beliefs and, you know, injected values from other people, subordinating to what our parents think or our employer thinks or whoever that we say is important things, to get down to what's true for us. Because really it's a constant thing that it's a practice. Just like meditation's a practice.
It's never a static line that you get to and go, well, now I'm enlightened.
And as we know, we get, you know, as soon as you clear one challenge, you get the next one.
You just go up a quantum.
It's a growth. That's the growth of what it means to be human. So don't get too cushy.
Or too stuck.
Or too stuck either. Yeah, that's right.
Because there is an avenue and there is a way.
Yeah.
And Bridget is your girl, ladies, if you need a bit of help or direction.
And it's been actually really
inspiration.
Because I've had a couple of people email me with their stories, and it's been really inspiring to me, because it can feel like, oh, what am I doing saying this stuff? Like,
well, it's not... I mean, who do you ever talk about this? I haven't had a period in 2.5 years. Or I realise that I'm fertile in other areas of my life and I just need to direct that energy somewhere else.
Yeah, no one says that.
No one says that. That's my point.
Yeah. And it can feel, if you're talking to people like your girlfriends who don't have those challenges, it can feel even more isolating, because I guess their natural reaction is like, you know, and I had a friend who's like a scientist, really quite medical, and her only avenue was all of the medical stuff, which made me feel like a problem. And I knew I wasn't a problem. You know, like, I'm not a problem to be solved. That there's...
What are you if you're not a problem to be solved?
I'm a human that has heart and a path.
A soul that has a journey.
Yeah, a soul that has a journey and a path to be uncovered. You know, and a experience to learn from.
Love it. I'm going to leave it there.
Yeah.
If you would like to send any well wishes on our Facebook page, I would love to see them. And everybody help Bridget celebrate the amazingness of her pregnancy, which I'm rapt about, and I'm sure that I hope that it's inspiring for everybody else that's out there as well, because whether it's the creation of a baby or a business or a new life or whatever it is for yourself, that there are quality questions you get hopefully out of these podcasts, and a journey that they send you on to really start uncovering your layers and your belief systems to shift you to that next quantum of where you want to be.
That was beautiful.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you for being vulnerable, Bridget.
That's okay, I think.
And if you would like to check in with us, we are on Facebook /Nourishing the Mother. We have our retreat coming up on the 5th and 6th of March.
Yes, and we've only got 2 spaces left, and we're keeping it really limited
We're keeping it
time.
really little because we really want to work more wholeheartedly on those quality questions as a coaching format.
Yeah.
As opposed to just dealing out information. So if you would like to jump on board, please have a look at our event within our Facebook page, or certainly contact us and we would love to have a chat to you about it. And if you are slightly interested, jump on in there, because you just never know where that inkling of inspiration is going to lead you.
Yeah.
And if you would like to connect in with Bridget, it's at suburbansandcastles.com.
That's right.
And your upcoming movie.
Yes, so that's towards the end of February, and it is on the 24th, and it's called Most Likely to Succeed, and it's all about looking at our education system and how it can transform to be more led by the child and their own inner spirit and inspiration, which I think is a beautiful message. So that's happening very soon. And to connect with Julie,
thepleasurenutritionist.com. And if you would like to share any of our podcasts, rate us on iTunes. It really does keep us going, and we love interaction on our Facebook page or emails or messages, because it does really let us know that our tribe out there on Nourishing the Mother is nourishing themselves and peeling back their layers, and that just feels such a purposeful journey for us.
it does.
So until next week, when we continue
Continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey. We'll see you then.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.